Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a Tuesday edition of Morning Cup of Hockey presented by Bet365. I'm told we shouldn't really talk about specific bets about Bet365 from our chat. Tommy T, shout out to you, but open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, so use our code NATION, NATION, in all caps. I'm just going to voice right now that my co-host, Colby Cohen, might go off the rails with our first segment of today's show. And I'm going to hand it over to him because all of a sudden he loves the off-ice NHL drama. He can't get enough of it. So, Colby, where do you want to start?
Well, first of all, why do you got on this morning and you were like dragging and you were like all sad because you
first thing
worried.
I saw was the Dom post, and I was like, are we really going to spend time talking about this?
You were all worried because, oh no, what's Colby going to say about all my little buddies and all my
I'm friends with everyone involved.
All my little keyboard warrior friends who hide behind their graphs and who have no idea about the sport of hockey, yet they think that they have this big, important platform. Oh, give me an absolute break, Johnny. Listen, if you want, we can have Vic put you in timeout. And
listen, I'll talk. I'm friends with everybody involved. Like, I just thought the whole thing was stupid, and I can't believe how much of a talking point it's become.
Well, let's just start with the fact that if you're going to run your mouth on social media and you're going to be one of these people that, wants to trash players with your keyboard, okay, and you want to get your little graphs and you want to talk a bunch of shit, when you get the opportunity to then face it and you get invited on a show to have a healthy debate, which you agree to, and then you issue the most pathetic apology to your quote unquote, your little fans about the backlash, you bend the knee because God forbid you talk to someone who's a little controversial. It's just pathetic. It's pathetic. I'm not going to read this guy's pathetic little letter that he put out. I'm sure everybody saw it. But, if you're going to run your mouth,
2.3 million views.
Back it up.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's funny because I did a little quote tweet yesterday and said, this is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. And it, no joke, got more likes than any tweet I've ever had in my life. So it's just pathetic. And I got to tell you something. It's not everybody at The Athletic. There's some really good writers at The Athletic. There really are. And actually, a couple of them wrote me yesterday how they were all secondhand embarrassed by what I did.
It was a dumb thing to do.
But it's a bigger issue with people that want to just talk shit with no consequences anymore because they're tough guys with their keyboards. And you get this opportunity to defend your point and you can't do it. And honestly, he had probably a bunch of, backlash from the woke side of things because of Tony D'Angelo, and we know what side of things he always stands on. And again, it's just embarrassing. It's really, really embarrassing. And again, if you're going to take shots at players, when a player then confronts you and then you have an open opportunity. And you know what? I'm going to comment on the fact now, too, that the guys who run that podcast should have had him on. Why not have Tony D'Angelo on anyway and talk about it? Because they're worried about the same thing. We had Tony D'Angelo on. We got plenty of hate for it. But you know what? Everybody should get to say their piece, and then you can agree with it or don't. Nobody's forcing you. But the reality is if you want to live in your little bubble where you can't get offended by anyone, then shut your computer and shut your phone and sit in your basement and stare at a wall. Give me a break.
The funniest thing to me, though, is the moral of the argument. People that can't just talk hockey, that don't see the world eye to eye. And, listen, not everyone agrees with Tony. Not everyone agrees with Dom in the way that they see the world. Colby, you and I don't agree in everything the way we see the world. And we talk every day.
All day, every day.
And that's the the point of this whole thing. That's what it should be. It's like, no matter who you vote for, no matter what your worldviews are, like, people should be able to talk hockey and just leave it at talking hockey. And that's the issue I have with it. But I'm not going to sit here and like blame DJ and blame Pete for not having him.
Oh, I am, because grow a pair.
Their whole point was to have.
Listen, you get a differing point of view. Okay, somebody that might be controversial, grow a pair. Okay, don't bend the knee. Okay, it's your show. Bring him on. Let him say his piece. Like, it's just, listen, I got no time for this. And as far as the analytics stuff goes, again, I am not a hater of analytics, but this is why people hate the analytics crowd, because there are people like little boy Dom who hide behind their computers and their graphs. And when confronted, they crawl under their desk and they type from under their desk. This is why people hate them, because they act super arrogant and they've never played the game of hockey. Never. Okay. So for the record, and I saw this in the chat, I think it was from New York Marine, and it says, ironically, one of the best analytic minds in hockey is Valaquette, who was a player. Okay. Yeah. Because there is a place for analytics. A lot of players even like to know some of these different things. And I heard you talking about some analytical stuff on the sheet yesterday with Jeff Marek. And even Jeff said he talks to people in these NHL organizations that run their analytics. And the first thing that he said yesterday, Jeff, was don't fall in love with expected goals, because these teams have. I
knew you would love that.
They have a way deeper meaning for these types of statistics. Okay. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. The way this whole thing transpired. And you know what? In my opinion, Tony DeAngelo walks away from this looking like the mature one and looking like the one willing to face people that have nasty things to say about him. Look what he did with Tim Peel a couple of weeks ago. And look how that all ended, right? They went at it on Twitter. They got on a podcast. They talked face to face and they moved on. Right.
Tim's just started to trash people for podcast guests.
And listen, Tim Peel had a little.
I liked him.
I had a back and forth with Tyler Yaremchuk last night on social media, which, I mean, again, I woke up and I saw it and I immediately texted Tyler and said, I certainly didn't have Tyler Yaremchuk versus Tim Peel on my bingo card last night. I did not see that coming, but it was funny watching them go back and forth nonetheless. And look, I think Tyler was kidding, because he's talking about, the Edmonton Oilers, and he puts his fan hat on like you do with the Rangers. And Tim Peel was just standing up for his friend. He's standing up for a referee who's a good friend of his, which I also have absolutely no problem with.
No problem, yeah.
Right?
No problem.
People should stand up for their friends more on social media, even if it's unpopular. Stand up for your friends.
But also, just like the Twitter battles like that, I never get myself involved in that shit. Like, I read that stuff, whether it's Dom versus Tony or Tim versus Tyler, and I'm just like, what good does any of this do?
Okay, well, they're very different. We're talking about,
but just like Twitter, just typing on Twitter wars all day anyway. Like, I've just never.
I'll tell you when it's good. It's good when I'm
on Twitter to talk about hockey, to laugh, and to
face each other face to face on a podcast. Look what happened on our show last year. Vetrano and I, 10-year-old Twitter beef.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. But you guys didn't have like a Twitter battle.
Yeah, we had a little back and forth. That's not true. We had a little back and forth on Twitter 10 years ago where he chirped me. I saw it. I chirped back. And then he came on the show and we talked it out.
Yeah.
So I listen, man. Jay Thielen says, Johnny, you're definitely not going to find love on Twitter.
Yeah, I saw that.
Listen,
you'd be surprised, guys. You'd be surprised.
I just yesterday watching this all unfold, it just made me hate somebody that I don't know. I don't know this little Dom guy. Okay. Yeah. I don't know him personally. And I generally have a rule: don't hate somebody you don't know. That's generally a rule that I go by. If I don't know someone personally, I try really not hard. Don't hate somebody you've never met, right? Like, because look, you've got to meet people and make decisions for yourself, whether they're popular or unpopular. Meet them and make decisions for yourself. But man, I got to tell you, I dislike that guy.
Yeah, I mean, listen,
I'm problem with him. Big problem.
I'll say it firsthand though, Colby. Like I told you before we had Tony on, I wasn't like a Tony D'Angelo guy. I didn't like Tony, but I didn't really know him either. I just didn't.
But you didn't hate him.
But I didn't hate. I mean, I don't hate anybody. Who do I hate? Have you ever heard me say I hate anyone?
We have a list. Don't you have one name on our list?
That's a girl that like stood me up.
Okay, but she's on our list.
Yeah,
we do have a morning cup of hockey. We'll call it the no-fly list. That is a private no-fly list. People that we have a big issue with, and Johnny does have one name. There's like 6 names on the list. One of them is from Johnny.
Vic just got off of it,
and that's true. Vic was on it for a while. When he did something he shouldn't have. And he's worked his way off it. This morning actually is the first day he's off it because he got us Rick Bowness, who's coming on the show later. But just these different things that were going on yesterday. I mean, the other thing that I was just absolutely cracking up of the whole Keith Yandel story that he told on Spit and Chicklets the other day about Greg Cronin. And so like we wouldn't revisit this because like you already have all seen this on Spit and Chicklets. I laughed pretty hard at this story when I heard it because like I did have some interactions with Greg Cronin when I was in college, and I do know guys that went to play for him or whatever. But we want to play the clip from you from the Spit and Chicklets podcast, or as Don Sweeney would call it, the Spitting Up on Yourself podcast. That was all so ridiculous. I think we've got G in the chat today too, so this is perfect. But let's play the clip of this quick little Keith Yandel story, because then we want to show you Greg Cronin's rebuttal, which we're gonna ask you guys in the chat how we feel about this rebuttal, because I kind of smell bullshit on what Greg Cronin said. So let's play it. Let's play it.
There's a classic story involving Patty Yandel and Greg Cronin.
Yeah, so anyone who knows my mom, she's a real one. At the time, I decommitted from UNH, and I was on the open market, and he was coaching at Northeastern at the time. So they call me, they bring me over there, they bring me out to dinner, show me everything, have a good night, whatever. Next day, I tell my mom, because my best friend, Billy Ryan's at Maine, I go, I'm going to go to Maine. Bill's at Maine. I want to go play with Bill. So she's like, all right, well, you got to call Northeastern and tell them that you're not going to come there, do the right thing. So I'm like, okay, sure. I call him. He loses his mind on me for about 15 minutes. He's like, you piece of shit. You're never going to play anywhere. You're an absolute bum. I went to Maine. I know all those coaches. I'm calling them right now. You will not play one single game for that team. There is no way.
He got that personal. You're like, you just offered me a full ride, clown boy.
Yeah. And like paying for dinners and stuff, which they probably, whatever. And then I'm in the kitchen of my parents' house phone. This is before cell phones. And I'm like this on the phone. My mom can hear him screaming. She's like, give me the phone. Give me the phone. I'm like, no, it's fine. She's like, give me the phone. So finally I just hand her the phone, and all I hear is say, you ever talk to my baby again like that, my husband will be home in 15 minutes, blah, blah, blah. Whatever she said, I didn't really hear the end. Click. And then she walks back. She's like, all right, good job calling them. You're fine. But yeah, he was a dude, like threatening he was going to call the coaches at Maine, which he went to Maine. You will not play one single game there, I promise. Which he was right. I didn't play a game there, so I didn't go there. So I'm like, just whatever. You want to feel tough yelling at a 17-year-old kid. Like, okay, yeah. I remember like when we used to play them in the NHL, I think he was a assistant coach or like eye in the sky for someone. He used to be on the bench during warm-ups, and I'd like look at him and be like, ugh.
So just give quick context here.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Mike Grinnell, who's the producer and one of the personalities and voices for Chicklets. So apparently Keith Yandel actually corrected a little bit of this story this morning on Chicklets. Cronin did do all of that, but he actually came to his house and he did it in person. Okay. Not over the phone. And so I guess a reporter in Anaheim asked Greg Cronin about this yesterday. And if you could put that up, and I'll read it, Vic, how Greg Cronin responded. And he said, I don't know Keith Yandel that well. And he's from the Quincy area, I think in Boston, but I've never really crossed his path. Never heard of that. I never recruited him. I don't even remember recruiting him. Never recall that. I would never verbally berate anybody on a phone call on a recruiting thing. Never heard of it. I'm not going to read the rest because it's just basically more denial from Greg Cronin. And So it does sound like this is total BS from Greg Cronin. And I will just say, I've talked to a number of guys, and I know a bunch of guys that played for him. This sounds exactly like Greg Cronin, okay? My most lasting memory of Greg Cronin was during a Beanpot game where he was so pissed off that he took a water bottle and he threw it at Colin Wilson as we were lining up for a face-off after we just scored. This is my freshman year in the Beanpot.
And Colin Wilson was the opponent.
Yes, the opponent. And this was in
player.
the Beanpot consolation game. We lost to BC in the opening game in overtime. Gerby put us out of our misery in overtime. And Cronin threw a water bottle at Colin Wilson because he was so mad that he didn't get a penalty about something. The guy is an absolute lunatic. I 100% bet money that he actually did everything Keith Yandel said that he did. Not to mention, you're not going to forget recruiting Keith Yandel. Sorry, I don't believe that either. I run into hockey people from like literally 20 years ago that are like, oh, yeah, I remember we sat down during your recruiting visit like 20 years ago, right? And I was certainly not Keith Yandel. So I don't buy it for 2 seconds. Greg Cronin is full of shit. We all know he has the temper to do exactly that. And you know what? There are a lot of coaches that get angry when you call them to tell them you're not going there. Like there are. Not every coach takes it in stride. Like not one.
I've never had to do that. I did that once. I did that to Craig Doremus. I told him I was leaving the Moose to go to the Rockets, and that was tough. That was a tough call. They gave me a lot of shit. That was
Who
tough.
did you have to tell that to?
Craig Doremus and Vinny Smith. I left their team to go to like one of our rival teams my 12th grade year.
Yeah, well, knowing what I know now, that doesn't really surprise me all that much. And Mike McMahon has entered the chat, one of the best college hockey reporters out there, and says Cronin has mellowed out, but at NU, Cronin was a blast to cover because he was a lot unhinged. And I'm willing to bet Mike McMahon was at the Beanpot game that I was referring to, where he threw the water bottle at Colin Wilson. Again, it was a consolation game, which still matters. Right? It's still a non-conference game, so it still matters in the pairwise. But it's been a funny couple of hours here on with all of the beef happening on social media. Maybe even over
how much you love it. You usually kind of hate this stuff, I feel like.
Well, because honestly, like
just people that are involved.
Some of it has been really, really entertaining to me because I know the people that are involved. And like Keith Yandel he's a friend of the show. Yeah. He came on. He's a beauty. He's like one of the nicest guys and most successful guys of all time. Like, he treats everybody amazing, right? Whether he knows you, he doesn't know you, gives everybody the time of day. Like, he's an awesome guy. And it's because he comes from an awesome family. Like, his dad, Buddy, is the absolute man. Like, longtime scout in the National Hockey League and just an absolute beauty. Like, and I don't throw the term beauty around as freely as everybody does. It
feels weird coming out of your mouth.
Yeah, because I don't use it very often because when I use it, I want it to be meaningful. And
that's usually the word love.
Buddy Yandel is an absolute beauty. Keith's dad and Brian's dad, like the guy's unreal. So I've been enjoying it the last couple of days with all the beef. The Dom one, that was more anger and annoyance. Yeah. The Yandel one was more funny, and the Cronin response, like such bullshit, just such bullshit. I'm sorry.
So if you had to rank them from 1 to 3, including Tyler and Tim, what's your order?
Yeah, I mean, they're all different. They're all different, but entertaining, right? They're all different and entertaining. So is that game last night between the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. That was entertaining.
Yeah. Well, also, I see MYR Marine saying, Laz, do you get a turn today? I want to hear how you feel about the Steve Dangle report on the New York Rangers players only meeting. I didn't even see that. What was the Steve Dangle report? Do we have that?
We'll give
someone to send me that. Yeah.
We'll give Vic a little bit of time to pull that up. But we haven't really covered a game. Sometimes when there's a really good game on, we'll dive into it a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Edmonton and Florida, because I got to tell you, that game, I hope you had your popcorn out. I mean, besides the fact that the goaltending was horrible, it was still an entertaining game. If you want goals, you got goals last night, Johnny. So let's talk about that game while we wait for Rick Bowness. We have 10 minutes before he comes on. He'll probably be a couple of minutes early. He's a hockey guy, right? So
But before we get into any of that, I just want to talk about our sponsor, Proraso, the most complete choice for shaving and beard care, made in Italy since 1948. Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at proraso-usa.com with our promo code hockey15. And Colby, let me ask you, because there were a lot of bad goals that we talked about this morning. Which goal to you stood out the most? To me, I'm going to just say mine before you got to give your piece here, because you're on fire today and I want to keep feeding you. But the Mikkola goal, which I believe was the tying goal, was the most Florida Panther type of goal that I've seen happen this year and probably in the last 2 seasons, because I forget who threw the hit on Jeff Skinner, but then the entire Oilers bench and forwards on the ice were so distracted by that hit that there's a 3-on-2 going on in their D zone and Edmonton doesn't recover enough. And Mikkola is backdoor for a wide open tap in on Stuart Skinner. But if you can get the clip, Vic, to show the neutral zone, there's 3 Oilers up there just worried about the hit on Jeff Skinner and no one's concerned about playing defense. And that to me is like the most typical Florida Panthers kind of hockey. They bring you into the shit and then they score and make you pay for it. But Colby, what was your thought? And I'm going to read the comments here about the Steve Dangle stuff because I didn't see that yesterday.
I mean, look, this goal was poor coverage, obviously, and like you said, everybody kind of gets baited in, and Skinner's yelling at the ref, and McDavid decides to change, and then all of a sudden it's in the back of the net. But like for me, it's more about the soft goals. You know, I'm actually I'm hosting actually. I'm sitting in the big chair today on Daily Face-Off Live, and we're going to have I have Carter Hutton as my co-host today. And, you know, I can't wait to ask him because, I mean, I wrote down my notes, right? The Connor Brown goal, bad goal. Okay. I thought the Draisaitl goal
was the worst one.
The Draisaitl goal, and I know he scores from there quite often, but I thought that was a bad goal. I thought he was even further out than normal. He also didn't go posting in like he sometimes does. The Forsling goal, which was the 4-3 goal, I thought that was a terrible rebound by Stuart Skinner. Obviously, it's a bad bounce, but when you take a floater and you put a rebound directly in front of your net into traffic, well, bad things are going to happen. So I thought that was a bad goal by Skinner. I thought the Reinhart goal is a bad goal by Skinner. And then I thought the Kapanen goal was a bad goal by Bobrovsky. So, like, it was equally bad goaltending last night. And I thought that game had some really big, I mean, I guess now as I'm thinking about saying this, it's going to be an obvious comment, but the sort of the different sections of the game, you know, like off the hop, right? Florida comes out, they get a shorthanded goal, they're pushing. Edmonton looks a little bit back on their heels. And then Edmonton starts back. Right. Well, then Edmonton starts to drag themselves back into this game. And then at one point it's 4-2. And you're like, all right, these guys are rolling, right? Like, and then you start to see like they start to get loose with their coverage, which is something that I actually want to ask Rick Bowness about today, because I remember he said it on either Hockey Night in Canada or TNT, you know, maybe it was a month ago, where he talked about how loose teams have been in their own zone. And you watch some of those goals, like there's bodies around, but nobody's picking anybody up. It's a lot of puck watching. And you watch the way both those teams defended the rush last night. Really bad, you know, really, really bad. But, you know, having said all of that, still an entertaining hockey game. I mean, you say we've got a rematch of the Stanley Cup final and we're going to see 11 goals. Like who wouldn't sign up for that, Johnny?
Paul Maurice said their rush defense was AWOL, and that if they do that against Edmonton, they're going to put up 15 goals on them. And that's basically what we saw last night. Didn't all of Edmonton's goals essentially, maybe not the Draisaitl one, come off the rush? 4 or 5 of their goals?
Broken rushes. Yeah, like little top down rushes. Yeah, just getting between the layers. You know, and I think part of Florida's problem right now is the way that it is the way that they're defending the rush, but I'll go a little deeper with it. It's their back pressure, right? Because you think about it, and I usually put on like a little bit of a defenseman's lens when I look at these things. You know, for a defenseman, you want to have a good gap, right? That's the obvious point, but it's a lot easier to gap. And when you have a lot easier to take ice when you've got back pressure. Like, F3 was pretty much non-existent for both teams. But once there's no F3, what are you doing? Are you putting your head down and you back checking hard to the house? Are you putting so much back pressure on either Edmonton or Florida that you know that if you don't self chip or you don't go to back ice, most likely you're going to turn the puck over. So,
just ignore it. Just ignore it. I'm holding it in too. Just ignore it.
Oh God, we're trying not to get political on this show. G, we try not to get political. We do at times, but we try not to.
Not you.
So, yeah, Johnny couldn't probably name like the 3 branches of government we started quizzing him. I don't think so. But so let me ask you about this. What did you think about? And I see New York Marine just put it in the chat. The kick or the non.
I don't think it was a kick. We all agreed when we were watching it that it was a good goal. Like Matthew, you can turn your feet and redirect a puck. Like to me, that wasn't. I didn't think that was a kick at all. And I had no problem with that being called a good goal.
Yeah, I mean,
Vic agreed. You agreed. Like
you can always redirect. You can redirect. You just can't have a kicking motion on a goal. And like, here's the thing: when a puck is coming at your foot, you always kind of turn to like protect yourself a little bit, right? Like, even if that is going to hurt more, taking it on the side of your foot. But I thought that was the right call, and I thought Tkachuk did a nice job of making sure he stayed out of Skinner's way. He didn't give the refs any opportunity to call any type of goalie interference there.
Also, what do you think of this? Because sometimes I wish Vic, can you put that back up and see just Tkachuk's reaction after it goes?
Oh, look at that. We've got Northern Ireland with us today. Benny, first nice. Time listening to the show, tuning in live. Much love from Northern Ireland. We love that.
I just want to see, and yes, we do love or appreciate the love from Northern Ireland, but I guess this isn't going to show it. Tkachuk's reaction. Sometimes a player, you can tell if they feel guilty for the kicking motion or not, right? Like, I think if you score like that, you got to celebrate no matter what. Sometimes the body language of the player can really tell the intention. And Tkachuk there, like, I don't think there was any hesitation to show that he, scored that goal in a way that was a redirection and not a kick. But there was one angle that I saw from like the blue line. It was like an on ice angle from like essentially behind the play where it did look like more of a kick from that angle. But every other angle I saw, it looked fine to me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this as we kind of wait for Rick Bowness here in the next couple of minutes.
I saw we have the Steve Dangle report now.
Do you let's save Rangers. Maybe we'll get to Rangers at the end. Okay. The Rangers have not given us anything to talk about. I sorry, New York Marine. We talk way too much Rangers, and it's the same old nonsense right now. But let me ask you this:
your foot, Jay, isn't kicking though. Like,
do you think this could be a Stanley Cup rematch? Like, do you foresee that happening? And if so, or if not, give me a little bit of a look into your brain as to why you do or do not.
Why not? I mean, listen, I think it definitely can be. I think Edmonton's been one of the hotter teams in the league as of late. Florida, we know who they are, whether they're playing good or playing bad. We know what they'll be in the playoffs, right? Like, they're still going to be a tough team to go against come springtime. But Florida, Edmonton, the concerns are still the same as they were last year. Will Stuart Skinner be good enough in the playoffs? Will their decor and blue line be strong enough to hold up against? Listen, look at Edmonton's path to the Cup last year. They beat Nashville or LA in the first round, and then they played Vancouver in the second round. And then on the other side, Dallas had to run through Vegas and Colorado. Like, it all depends on who the Oilers draw also, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say there's an easy playoff series in the NHL, but when you look at the path to the Cup final, the Oilers certainly had an easier one than Dallas would have, or than Florida would have. Yeah. Florida went up against Boston, then or Tampa first, then Boston, then the Rangers. Like, 3 pretty tough teams. I think it all depends on the draw as well. But both teams, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a rematch. I think they're both.
I guess I worry that Florida's had 2 years where they've played deep into June.
Tampa went 3 years in a row.
Yeah, it's true, but it doesn't change my concern. It doesn't change my concern for like the beating some of these guys have taken. So I don't think I see it, to be honest. I don't. I think I don't know. Like, I'm not signing up for that to be a rematch. And
I would give
think,
Florida the edge though, simply because I think the West is much better than the East.
But I think
Florida's path will be as tough as Edmonton's would.
Edmonton has to address their back end and their personnel, and I think that they will. But I'm a little concerned about Florida running out of gas. I am. I'm a little concerned with it. You know, they have lost a couple of pieces. You know, like energy guys and role players and depth players, but those guys are very important. So I do think that I don't see a rematch of that coming. And I will say this, and again, I want to shift quickly into the other game that I watched last night, just for a couple of minutes as we wait for Rick Bowness to join us here. Did you catch any of the Washington Dallas game, or were you just dialed on the Florida game?
I was dialed on Florida Edmonton, and I watched Colorado Vancouver.
So you stayed up a little bit late. So
I didn't see a second of Dallas and Washington.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like we're gonna get Rick here in the next couple of minutes. He's downloading the app to be able to jump on. Here's what I want to say about that Dallas Washington game. That was a good hockey game, man. That had a bit of a playoff feel to it, just because it was such a heavy game.
Yeah.
And
we also have not talked about Dallas at all this year.
At all. And I got to tell you, man, the goaltending was really good last night. Like both goalies. I mean, when that game is 1-1 late, you know, they were kind of trading chances until Hintz when Hintz scores late in the game. Sorry, it was 2-1. They traded chances back and forth. Like Lindgren made a couple of big saves. Ottinger absolutely stones Dubois. Like Dubois gets right between the hash marks and gets fed right out in front. And Ottinger just makes a huge save. And it wasn't 2 minutes later, okay, Ropa Hintz scores a goal, a perfect little shot. Like it was a perfect little spot. It wasn't under the bar. It was kind of one of those between the blocker and the pads. And like I'm watching Dallas and I'm like, we just haven't talked about Dallas enough. Like
at all.
They're
my
a problem.
They were my cup pick.
They were last year, I think, too.
I think we don't talk about them because we kind of expect them just to be there.
It's true.
Right? Like there's no drama. There's nothing necessarily that surrounds Dallas that's either concerning or exciting. They're just solid.
Dallas just quietly goes about their business in a real successful manner. And I feel like they've been doing that for the last like 5 or 7 years.
Yeah, where you talked to Rick Bowness about it.
You just know what you're getting when the Dallas Stars show up. Like there's a certain standard that I think Jim Nill has kind of installed, and then their coaches have carried it. They had Rick Bowness, you know, Pete DeBoer. Like you're talking about really good coaches. So
yeah, good point on Jeremiah staying out for the season is drama.
Okay, point. But okay, that's an injury, but it doesn't feel like drama though. Right?
Well, it's a story. It's a story.
Right. Okay. All right. So look, let's bring Rick Bowness in to the show. His first time coming on. So we're very, very honored and lucky to have him joining us this morning. So hey, Rick, how are you, man? We really appreciate you coming on and doing this.
No problem. My pleasure, guys.
You've been crushing What was that?
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you. I think you should put the glasses back on. It was a good look.
No, I hope I don't need them during this interview. I try not to wear them, but I can't read anything without them. So I couldn't get on my computer, so we're on the phone, so we'll have to make that work.
So what's going on? You're crushing it with Sportsnet. Awesome job on TNT. Are you loving the media side of the game, or do you miss being behind the bench at all?
Oh, I miss everything about being behind the bench. And I knew that when I made the decision to step down and retire as a coach. Listen, I love it. Listen, I've been doing it for 49 years, playing and coaching. It's the only life I know. But when I made that decision, I knew right away, you're going to miss everything about this, the practice, the travel, the guys, everything, especially the games. You miss the games, you miss the excitement, you miss the pressure, which I always really enjoyed. But I'll tell you, when I made that decision and Judy and I talked about it, I told her at that point, you're going to miss this more than I do. And she does. She was always great with the wives, and she loved the game. So, but you know what? We made the decision. We walked out on our terms. And I think that helps me get over missing the point that no one forced me. No one showed me the door and said, that's it, you're done. I walked out on my terms. And I think that helps overcome some of the fact that I am missing it quite a bit. But the TV thing and listen, I don't think I'm good enough to make a career out of it. Is there something I can do to help out every once in a while? Well, sure. But it's not something I don't think I can. I'm not good enough to make. I'm a coach. I'm not a TV guy.
Yeah, but see, I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because when you talk and you're on that panel, you even can see the faces of Biz or if it's Lundqvist. Like, I do think as hockey people, we're always interested in what a coach has to say. And look, Rick Tocchet was on there for a couple of years, and you could tell he was like you. He wanted to be behind a bench. He didn't want to be doing that. But every time he showed or said something, I'm like, okay, this guy's been in the NHL as a coach for a long time. Like, I'm interested in what he has to say. And I think your co-hosts and your other panelists probably felt the same way. You could actually kind of see it when you were on the panel.
Well, the Sportsnet is easy because I've known Ron McLean forever, and we all know what a tremendous pro he is. Kevin BX is like a third son to us, so I'm really close with Kevin. So being with those guys is certainly it's very comfortable. But again, they're the TV experts. But I am very comfortable on the Sportsnet because of those relationships with those guys. And Kelly Rudy, I've known forever as well. The TNT, I did that to one game, and that was fun. That was interesting. I know I'm going back on at some point in the second half. They've contacted me yesterday about some potential dates. So, yeah, we'll dabble in it. Keeps me busy.
Well, first of all, I feel embarrassed, but it's kind of a compliment, because when researching you when you were coming on this morning, I had no idea that you coached for that long. I wouldn't have thought you were a day over 50 with how you look. You look incredible, seriously.
We're pushing 70. It's coming next month.
I'm being serious. I'm being serious. You look incredible on TV, and Colby's embarrassed for me. I don't give a shit. But my question with that is, being that you've coached in the league so long and now you're on the TV side, when you used to watch broadcasts, let's say on an off night as a coach, and maybe the panel was ripping your team, like, do you sit in that seat now and feel uncomfortable having to rip on a team or speak negatively about people? Like, how does it feel to do that?
Well, I try not to look at it that I'm ripping on somebody or
criticism, I guess. Critiquing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to show what happened. And listen, if there was no mistakes in hockey, there'd be no shots on net. There'd be no chances. No one would be watching. Mistakes have to happen out there. It's a game of mistakes. You want to minimize them as much as you can. So I don't look at it that, okay, I'm going to rip into this guy or I'm ripping into this team. I'm not doing that. Will I try to explain what happened? And you can't. If there's a goal scored, somebody's made a mistake, right? So I'm not trying to be critical as much as I'm just trying to point out, okay, this is what happened. And again, it's a game of mistakes. And any team that I've always coached, we always said that. Listen, stuff happens out there, man. You just got to adjust, and they're going to get their chances. They're going to get their goals. We're going to make some mistakes. Let's make sure we minimize ours and try to make them to force the opposition into making a lot more mistakes than we do. And that's what hockey is. It is. It's fast paced. It's highly skilled now. The game is so much better today than it was 10, 15 years ago, simply because of the high skill level and the great athletes we have playing in our league. So mistakes are going to happen. And I'm just trying to explain to people, this is what happened there.
Yeah.
And without ripping on anyone or being totally negative, but if somebody made a mistake for a goal to go in, you got to point it out. And without I always said this about coaching. When you go into a room, it's not only your words you're using, but it's the tone you use. Mm-hmm. You can take a very positive clip, and if you want to get after them, you can make it a negative just with the tone you use. And you can take a very negative clip and you can make it a positive, again, just with the tone that you use at that particular time. So I try to keep that tone in mind when I'm dissecting these games.
Well, Rick, I kind of want to talk a little bit about you and your career, because I started going through like all of your history and where you've coached and who you've worked with. And one of the interesting things that I didn't realize, and first I did not, I was a call up at the end of the season in 2011 for the Boston Bruins. So I do have my Stanley Cup ring behind me. So I'm sorry for that. I know that was well, not me. I was playing the 50-50 up in the press box with the other scratches. But what I noticed was the relationship between you and Alain Vigneault and how many years you guys actually worked together. And then I worked on the TV side in Philly for a couple of years while he was here too. And I don't know if the word is difficult, but how does it work when he works for you as an assistant coach for 4 or 5 seasons and then, flip the script to 2007 to 2013, you're an assistant coach under him for all of those years. Like that has to be, I don't know what the right word is for it, but the
dynamic
switched and the dynamic switches. Like, what was that like?
Actually, I just had dinner with Alain last week, so he's in Miami. We're north of Fort Lauderdale and Boca Raton, so
nice.
we did have dinner together. Listen, when I hired Alain in Ottawa in 1992, we knew we were going to have a tough time. Alain wasn't even a top candidate for a job there. The management said there's a kid across in Hull, the French market. He's having great success coaching junior. Maybe you want to talk to him. Well, 5 minutes into that conversation, I knew I was going to hire him because I knew he'd have my back. I knew we were going to have some very tough times in Ottawa, which clearly we did. And you want to support yourself with a staff that are on the same page, and you're going to support each other and you're going to have each other's back. So we never looked at that scenario as head coach, assistant coach. I've always looked at a staff as a staff. We work together. Yeah, ultimately someone has to make the final call, and that's the head coach. But we all know that going into it. But I worked very closely with my assistants. I always given them a lot of power, a lot of say in what goes on. Ultimately, the head coach makes that call. So when we went to Vancouver, actually before that, he wanted me to come to Montreal with him when he went to Montreal. But I ended up going to Phoenix simply because I thought they had a better chance to win the Stanley Cup than Montreal at that point. But so when we went to Vancouver together, it's the same thing. We're friends and we're on the same page and we're going to work together. And I'll have your back. You have my back. And we had Newell Brown with us for a while. And Newell used to say, you two are like an old married couple. You yell and scream at each other, then you pat each other on the back and you go win a hockey game. So we always felt free and as an assistant or a head, feel free to speak up, voice your opinion. If ultimately the head coach makes the call. So we would argue behind the door, the scenes, and once that decision was made, everyone supported 100%. We did it in Ottawa and we did it in Vancouver for sure. We had 7 great years in Vancouver, great franchise, great city to coach in, and we had great players. There's no question. There's the players that made that whole thing go. So we enjoyed our time together very much. Did we argue? Absolutely, we did. But again, when the door opened, we walked out. We were together, all on the same decision.
Are you guys now just arguing on the pickleball courts in Boca Raton? Are you guys playing 2-on-2 or what?
No, we're not into that pickleball yet. We're just the golf course is where we'll have the golf course.
You gotta get into pickleball. It'd be fun to play against you two, the two of you. That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, probably would.
But I kind of want to stick on Alain Vigneault for now too, because then you go to Tampa, right, where you're an assistant coach with Jon Cooper, and you have now years or even decades of experience behind an NHL bench, and Jon Cooper comes in for the first time behind an NHL bench. So that dynamic's got to be a little bit weird too, right? Because you're probably helping him out in the NHL for the first time, and now you've seen what Jon Cooper has become. But then you coach against Alain Vigneault in the Eastern Conference Final, which is one of the most darkest memories of my childhood as a Ranger fan. But what's that like too, coaching against one of your best friends in a conference final? Like, everything about the other guy. Like, I got to imagine that gives you an edge, right?
No, not really. No, the players decide the game. They do. The coaches get them ready. They give them a game plan. They try to get them, physically and mentally as prepared as they can. The players go on the ice. They're the ones making the call, making the deciding outcome in those games. That conference finals you're talking about, that was just completely wild. Because if you remember, we went into New York in Game 5 and we shut them out 2-0 or something.
I remember.
Then they come down to Tampa in Game 6 and they completely blow us out 7-3 or something crazy like that. Then we go back into Game 7, and we had talked to you before. Well, one of us is going to the Stanley Cup Finals, so whoever wins, great. And that's what we talked about in shaking hands in the lineup. But anyways, we ended up winning that game 2-0. So it was great hockey. But again, you prepare your team. The players decide the game. They're on the ice, and they're the ones paying the price to block the shot, take the hit to make a play, all the little things necessary to keep winning hockey games. So you give the players credit. You get into a game 6-5, 6-7, and you know what the other guy's going to do. You know what his matchups are in terms of defensive pairings, line matchups, and everything, face-off plays and everything. All those things are out the window. Now the players just have to go and execute and try to make the difference in the game. And unfortunately, we won that series. But after, especially in a play series like that, after a couple of games, you know the other coach's tendencies, regardless if you've had a history with them or not.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously you're deferring to the players and you're giving credit everywhere else. That's kind of, any experience I've ever had with you going back to when we met at the Winter Classic a number of years ago. That's kind of how you always operate. But this question is solely focused on coaches, and it's kind of becoming the NFL when it comes to NHL head coaches, the way guys are being given no time at all. Really, you're seeing coaches brought in for rebuilds that aren't seeing the end of their second season. The turnover seems to me to be as wild as ever. Obviously, not really your career because you had a lot of long stretches in places, but why do you think the sudden change in the way owners are clamping down, or maybe it's GMs or whatever the case may be? Because it does seem like the turnover these days, Bones, is a hell of a lot quicker than it used to be.
It's crazy. It is. Okay. So listen, you had mentioned John Cooper before.
Yeah.
So they have that fantastic year, and then they get blown out in the playoffs by Columbus. They didn't fire the coach. What they did was they changed some of the personnel on their team. They changed, I think there was 8 or 9 new players in there. When they won the cup, then 2 years later, and I had only gone for 2 years, there was like 9 new players. Half the lineup had changed. So they took the approach that, okay, we've got the right coach. We got to change the way we play with the personnel. We've got to get some grittier guys in there, which they did. But the game, we're a huge business now. It's a big, big business. And when you get into the money that the people are paying to come to games, and the money the TV is paying and everything else, there's a lot of pressure to win now, and on everybody, more so than ever before, because it's such a big business right now. And again, it's hard to rebuild today. It takes time, and it's easy to say you're going to have a rebuild, and then it's tough to go through it because it takes a lot longer today because of the cap and the no movement clauses and no trade clauses and all that, moving players around. It gets harder and harder. It doesn't mean it can't be done, because Tampa proved that. But the pressure on general managers now is greater than ever. The pressure on coaches now is greater than ever. And because a lot of these players now have 4, 5, 6 year contracts with no movement, no trade, they're not going anywhere. They're there. I like what Buffalo owner did yesterday. He came in and met with his team and said, listen, we're not making any major changes. You guys are the team. We brought you in here. Figure this out together. And I like that. I was like, because that's a support for Lindy and Kevin. So, but again, the pressure on every organization today, especially in markets that haven't won for a while, is greater than it ever has. And that's influencing these decisions on firing coaches, firing general managers when they have to. But it's just because the business of our game has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. And that pressure will continue, but a lot of it is tied into players today and they've earned it. I'm good for the players. They've earned great contracts, secure contracts, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, no movement, no trade. They're not going anywhere. Somehow the organization has to make it work with the coach and those players. But again, it's just a lot more pressure on everyone today, basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, but with that as well, do you think with the pressure, it's that much harder to be as a player to be patient, because I think back to Nathan McKinnon. I remember he had a press conference like the year before the Avalanche won the Cup, and he was like, I've been in this league 9 years, I haven't won shit, and I think about that with players now and the patience that it takes knocking on the door, like the Washington Capitals 2018. Like, how do you stick to that belief that the players that you have in your room can do it? Because right now, Rick, I want to ask your opinion on, listen, I bring up the New York Rangers on the show all the time. I'm a big Ranger fan. And right now it's a disaster, but how could they continue to have patience knowing what they've known about this group for the past few years?
Well, that ultimately it's always going to come down to that. Management, coaches, owner, they all have to look at the player. Can we win the Stanley Cup with that player in the role that we're asking him to play? Ultimately, it comes down to that question. And then you have to have a very honest answer, right? Can we win the Stanley Cup with the role that we are asking this player, regardless what we're paying him? Is he the guy that can make the difference when the pressure's really on and you need to win a game, you need to win a series? Is that the guy that can answer the bell? So the organizations have to get together and make those calls. Now, again, that's a lot easier said than done, and it is, right? You get free agents, well, you have to sign them because you don't want to lose them, and I understand all that, but that goes back to the business side of things. But ultimately, you have to look at those each and every player. Can we win the Stanley Cup with that player in the role we're asking? And then you have to make an honest assessment. And again, sometimes those once you sign a player, you've got him, because no one's going to trade for him because he's not performing well, or he's got no movement, or he's got to agree to go. It's just very complicated in today's hockey world.
Well, let me ask you on that. You coached in this league for the whole span of my lifetime, right? And so how involved were you when you were the coach in re-signing players, or at the trade deadline telling your GM, this is what I need, this is what I want? Like, how does that relationship between head coach and GM in your experience work? And, should coaches have more say? Because if coaches are getting fired quicker, I would think they should have more say in what players are being given to them by general managers.
Well, my last couple of head jobs I've had in Dallas with Jimmy Neal, who's an outstanding general manager and gentleman, and with Kevin Shale's day off in Winnipeg, another outstanding GM coach or gentleman and GM. Listen, they would always come to me, okay, what do you need? What do you think? We're talking about this. Ultimately, the coach decides. Again, like I said earlier, the coaches have to make a lot of tough decisions. Who's going on the ice next? That's all up to the coach. The GM has to make the final call on those. Now, again, when you have open communication with the GM and the coach, you hope you have a good rapport with them, and you hope you're all on the same page, which was certainly the case for me in Dallas and me in Winnipeg with the two GMs that I worked with. Ultimately, the general manager has to make that call. Now, if he's not coming to you and asking your input, or what do you need, what do you think of this guy, then there's a communication problem with the general manager and the coach. But in my situation, that's which I can only speak about, I was fortunate to work with two GMs that came to me and said, okay, what do you think of this player? What do you think if we're doing this? So did I need to know every conversation about any potential trade? Absolutely not. I don't want to be bothered with it. My job is to coach the players that are in front of me, coach the players that are there to that day. That was my job. That's the job as the head coach. Mm-hmm. You coach the players you have. The GM comes to you, and then it's ultimately that final call is his call. He has scouts, he hires people he has confidence in. You trust him to do your job. Ultimately, the general manager makes that call, and that's the way it should be.
Did you ever have a situation where a guy was at practice one morning or in the locker room one morning, and you were like, "Oh, I guess we got this player," and it wasn't communicated to you?
No, not at all. But I'll tell you a funny story. When I was coaching in Moncton, the Winnipeg Jets farm team way back in the 80s, and Paul Boudelier was playing for New Haven. And so we were playing, and then John Ferguson Sr. Was the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets at that point, and he called me about an hour before the game. We can make this trade. I said, go ahead. So we made the trade about an hour before the game. Now, the locker room in Moncton at that point was across the ice. So Paul had to put his suit back on. He walked across the ice And he, obviously we had to give him new gear and everything and he played for a month in that night. So literally an hour before the game, he got traded. Fergie called me and said, "We just made a trade." I said, "Okay, bring him over." He literally walked across the ice and he ended up playing for us that night. But those things happen.
Yeah.
But no, nothing like that would happen. The GM would always be in communication with the coach to avoid those scenarios. A coach walks in and says, "Well, who are you? Where'd you come from?"
Well, Bowen, sticking to that a bit, we have to give the Winnipeg Jets some love on the show because we do have a lot of Winnipeg Jet fans that listen to it and chime in our chat actively every day. And I spoke to Nikolai Ehlers earlier this year, and kind of sticking in the theme that what we're talking about right now. Ehlers said that last year was a big wake-up call for them. Like when you have a regular season like they had and then flop in the playoffs like they did, they knew things needed to change, but it wasn't the players, it was the mentality. And it's paying off for them this year. Those were his exact words. It wasn't the players, it was the mentality. And do you really think that players do have that ability to flip a switch? Like, is it really on the coach or GM to get their guys to buy in, or does that have to come from their own mentality themselves?
It's a little bit of everything, but eventually it has to come from the players. Eventually it does. And I'll go back to the Tampa Bay. They had that great year, got knocked out, swept. The players that they kept, the core players, they changed their attitude. They did. And they became a lot hungrier because the playoffs, as we all know, is a whole totally different animal. And so, yeah, Winnipeg, we had 2 good years. We got them back in the playoffs 2 years ago. We lost 4 straight to Vegas. Last year, we had a great year. We did not play well enough against Colorado, clearly, because we won the first game. They swept the 4. So those things have to hurt the players. If those moments do not hurt your players, then you're not going to win with them. You're just not. Because those things have to hurt. If you're willing to go through 82 games and have a great year and then not show up like you should and play like you should in the playoffs, and those things have to hurt. And I knew at the end of last year that did hurt our players. And you learn more from losing sometimes than winning. Those moments really have to dig deep into a player and hurt his pride. Now, if you look at the Jets, and I'm so happy for them. And I'm so happy for the owner, Chipman, and Chevy, and the players and the coaches. They're all doing a fantastic job. And they deserve all the accolades they're getting because they are having a great year. But losing those last 2 seasons has hurt the team. And it's pretty much the same team that we had at the start of last year. Before we traded for Monahan, before we traded for Toffoli, that is the lines that we had for the most part during the regular season. Now, they lost Brendan Dillon, who was a huge part of that team, but Dylan Sandberg has stepped up. Logan Stanley has stepped up. But there are all the guys that have been around that team for a couple of years. So that core group, the chemistry of that group, the culture of that group has changed dramatically in the last couple of years. And I agree with what Nick said, and I agree with what you're saying. That hurt the players, and they came to camp with a totally different attitude that, okay, regular seasons, we have to have good habits. We have to we have to pay attention to details. We have to compete. But when we get into the playoffs, I think you're going to see a totally different team because the pain of losing makes you stronger.
I think that's what everyone's concern is right now with the Jets, right? Like, will they keep that switch flipped in the playoffs, right? Like, because obviously it didn't go the way you guys wanted to last year, but this team's obviously really strong. And I just got one more question for you. It's a lighter one and a fun one. I spoke to one of your former players, and I won't say his name just because I don't know if
I hope I played him a lot.
I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing. I think it's a good thing, but one of your guys in Tampa said that you used to always take out the D for beers. You were the D coach, and you'd always take him out for beers. Just wondering if there was one memorable story or one memorable night with your D corps in Tampa when you guys went out for beers.
Only the 21-year-old guys, though, Johnny. Only the 21-year-old guys.
Or if we were in Quebec.
Yeah.
We used to go to Montreal. No, that was first of all, if something happened, I'm not going to share it. But I always took those opportunities to get away from the rink, talk to the players, and we didn't talk hockey. I wanted to know about their families. I wanted to know about them. So we just had open conversations. They told stories of their junior career or college career, wherever their European background, wherever it was. We just had a group of 8 of us or 9 of us, and just talk, have a beer, loosen up, have some fun away from the rink, and open up those lines of communication. And I always try to do that. I did that in Vancouver. I did that everywhere in Phoenix, just to build that extra bond with your players. And know that you care about them as human beings first and foremost. You have to. They're players.
And you were buying?
The team always paid.
So you got a little bit out of it too.
I used to threaten them because I used to give them a little card for their wallets and just keep points, right? And I used to say, the guy who shows up at this meeting and doesn't have that card, you're buying. But as soon as we sat down, out came all the cards on the table. So I knew I was getting hit with the bill.
Yeah, look, Kevin Dean used to do that with us in Providence and Boston, and those were good times. Like, it's, you know, that's your group of guys within the team, obviously, and it's important to just like have those light moments, especially when, you know, our head coach was Bruce Cassidy, and Bruce, he grinded us down daily. So having Dino to kind of lighten the load and take us out for that kind of stuff, you know, always went such a long way. Look, I got one more for you, and then we'll let you go. You've been more than generous with your time. I went through all these teams you played for, all these teams you coach. Two names that stuck out for me for totally different reasons, right? One was Dick Lambie, who I don't even know if you'd remember playing with him. I took classes with Dick Lambie when he went back to school to get his degree. He was probably, you know, in his 60s or whatever at the time. This is going back a while. And like, I've never laughed harder in my entire life than sitting in a history class with Dick Lambie. I don't know if you remember him. The other name was Barry Melrose, who I worked on the Frozen Four with for the last number of years, and is one of my most favorite people in the entire world. So what were those guys like to play with?
Well, Dick, we brought out of college and in St. Louis, and he had a lot to learn about, you know, yourself, that jump from college to the pros. Dick was a good player, played hard. Yeah, he was a lot of fun to be, and he was a lot of fun to be around. He had a great sense of humor. And you know, Melly, listen, there's no better person in the world than Barry Melrose. We fortunate enough to play with him. I've known him, I coached against him for a long time. But those guys, you got to remember, it's a game. It is. Ultimately, it comes right down. It's a game. Let's enjoy it as much as we can. Now, again, we talk about the pressures and everything else. That's all part of it. That's all what we sign up for.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's a game. So you want to have people around you that you can have fun with and make the game more enjoyable when you get to the rink that day. Certainly, Dick and Melly were two of those guys that made that possible.
Yeah, well, Barry made doing the Frozen Four, it was like a dream come true working with that guy. Like, just the dinners was the best part. It was the stories, the dinners, and then we brought it right back on the air as much as we could. And so when I saw that you guys were teammates, I'm like, oh, I can't not ask about one of my favorite human beings in the world, Barry Melrose. So look, my mom lives in Boca, so next time I'm down, I'm reaching out, and I'm gonna come play 9 holes with you early in the morning before it gets too hot. But we're grateful of your time today.
I invited myself, by the way. So
what'd you say, Johnny?
I said you would give me shit if I invited myself to hang out.
Yeah, but he wouldn't answer your call. That's the difference. So we're grateful for your time. Yeah. You've given hockey everything. Like, there's nothing you haven't given to this sport. I hope you do more TNT. We don't see Hockey Night in Canada here in the States. Yeah. We hope to see you on TNT more, because the night you were on, you were talking about how teams are playing loose defensively, and you're showing some of the goals. Like, that's good stuff for people to hear, like, because you're the one doing it in the locker room for the last 30 years, right? So it's great having you on today, Rick. Thank you.
And if you
talk to, you said 30, not 40.
Yeah. If you talk to Morris Lukowich, tell him I say hi.
I will, for sure. My pleasure, guys. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Appreciate it. What a beauty, huh? Did I embarrass you that whole time? Holy shit, man. Your reactions to my questions were ridiculous.
Well, like, you can't ask a question without making it about the Rangers. Like, we've got this guy on our show who's like, you know, been and done literally everything in the sport, and every question is about
I asked 2 Ranger questions.
Maybe. I mean, you just find a way. I almost give you credit. Like, it's like impressive. You're like, let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers, how they played against the New York Rangers in 19. It's just like, whatever. Listen,
that seems like a
things for you right now when it comes to the New York Rangers are difficult. I get it. It's similar to, it's like your dating life. It's all a little difficult right now.
I will say, Jay Miller, so Morris Lukowich and I play in a charity event together every year at Chelsea Pier in New York City, actually. So I've heard a lot of really cool old Winnipeg Jet stories from Morris. Maybe we'll get Morris on the show one day. That'd be cool. He's, you know, a Winnipeg Jet legend. from back in the day, but great guy. Awesome having Rick Bowness. I think, do we credit Vic? I think we have to.
Yeah. Oh, listen, you have to.
Yeah, we have to do it.
You
We
have
do
to.
it.
Like, you
Yeah.
can't not.
You guys might not believe it, but Vic actually texted Bones and got him on the show. The only and first person to answer Vic's text, I think.
Pretty much ever.
He gets ghosted
Bruce
more than me. If you can believe
Bruce
that.
Boudreau is his guest
That's
too.
true. That's his go-to.
Look, he doesn't help often, but when he does, it's meaningful. So we have
he's the coach guy. That's what Vic just said.
We have to give, like, if we're gonna throw shade when he steps up and he does something, we also have to. It's exact J-Rock when he texted us last night and said we got Rick Bowness. My response was, "Welcome back from vacation, Vic." That was exactly how I responded. So yeah, that was a great talking to him. Great, like some of those questions that I asked him, I know they're not necessarily relevant to like the games last night or this season, but you get an opportunity to get people like that on, a guy who's literally been through and done everything. You kind of want to know, how do your experiences relate? So great job, Vic. It was great. Sorry we didn't necessarily ask a lot of chat questions. We did see a lot of them, but at least I was pretty. I had certain things that I knew I wanted to ask him, and then he started talking about certain things. So I wanted to obviously follow up on a couple of things. So
I obviously had to talk about the Rangers.
Yes, we obviously had to spend at least 10 of the 30 minutes talking about the Rangers, although 2 shows in a row where we really haven't, spent much time with your pals. So, hey, listen, maybe they'll give us something to talk about here over the next 2 days of the show.
Yeah, I got a message on Hinge. Why did Kako get scratched? No, I'm kidding. That would be my wife.
J-Rock wants to know how I saw the chat while I was face palming. Good job yesterday on the sheet. You did an all right job.
We gotta address this. Randy Walcott. This is the message I sent you last week about your dad putting a C on your jersey or something when you were a kid. He just wrote in the chat, Randy Walcott. Johnny, was there any truth to someone getting a C put on their jersey as a child? Remember when I sent you that last week?
Yes.
Do you remember the little Flyers, junior Flyers story? That's Randy's the one who asked me the question.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what's your, so, I mean, are you, yes, I was always either an assistant captain or a captain in my youth hockey career. Other than when I played high school 1 year because I was a freshman. But I played for the junior Flyers growing up. So, I'm not sure the story checks out, I think I think we talked about this quite in depth, actually, how, the amount of people that come up to me or like tell someone else, like, yeah, I coached you here and I played with you there. And it's like, everybody kind of wants their little piece. So, Randy, what you're asking, that my dad put a letter on my jersey without anyone knowing, it's hard for me to put that past my dad. It's hard for me to put that past him. I will also say I never would have played a second of professional hockey or gone to college for free without him and without being pushed by him. I wish parents now push their kids like I was pushed. So it's hard for me to corroborate your story, Randy. I like I said, I was a junior Flyer. I was a junior Flyer during my youth hockey career, and I played for the Titans during my youth hockey career. And Charles, to answer your question, junior Flyers was South Jersey. No, junior Flyers is Westchester out of Iceline. I grew up in Villanova, PA, so I did not grow up in South Jersey. That's like, 30 minutes west of the city. And so that is my, a lot of my youth hockey years were spent at Iceline junior Flyers. And when it wasn't, it was with the New Jersey Titans, with the Havlins, with George Havlin, Mike Havlin. Mike Havlin's an assistant coach in Columbus now. And George is who I work with actually now at the Titans, on the teams that we coach. So, look, as I told Jonny, I was the same way at 9 years old as I am now, not afraid to say what's on my mind. There's probably a million memories people have of me, about things that I said as a youth hockey player or did that people probably's mouths were hitting the floor, because like what 8-year-old says those types of things. I also was not afraid when I was 8 or 9 years old to tell anybody I was going to play in the NHL, and seriously thought and meant it. How arrogant of me. So but I can specifically remember sitting at the Core State Center watching the Flyers play the Panthers. I mean, I couldn't have been 10 years old, 11 years old, and watching the Flyers play and actually thinking, these guys are good, but like, I'm not that far off. Like how
Really?
that's insane. That's crazy to think, but you almost have to believe it. Like you do. You almost have to believe it. So Big Willie style, can Jonny beat Colby in an NHL video game? I would bet money on it because
I don't play Xbox.
I'm not a video gamer. I've never really been. I did not spend my youth playing video games. We had a rink in my basement, a little sport court, later turned fake ice. So I could tell you that's where my time was spent, and in a war zone in the basement with my brothers and my dad, who absolutely used to beat us in hockey, like hard physical. You know, it was not a fun zone. It was a war zone in that basement growing up, which, you know, again, I think helped me in the game of hockey. So, so Randy, you're going to need another source, I guess, on this, because again, I don't put it by my dad, but I'm not sure the details of the story completely check out.
Sorry if I threw you off with that. I just realized that I never answered him when I asked you.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we talked about it. I told you what I told you. So, all right, let's get to Bet365 so you can give out your bad bets for the day. And then I think that's all the time we have today, Jonny.
It's actually Vic's bad bet today. This is Vic's pick. I want to make that clear because I would never bet on the Buffalo Sabres. And Vic wants to take the Buffalo Sabres money line tonight. And they are home against, or they're on the road, against Montreal Canadiens. Buffalo, we all know, has lost 10 games in a row. Their coach doesn't have an answer. Nobody in the organization seems to have an answer. But Montreal, has lost 3 out of their last 4. They've been struggling as well. And for some reason, Vic wants to take the Buffalo Sabres money line. So Vic's picks are usually better than mine. If you want to trust anyone, trust Vic. And that's tonight's pick, -125 on Bet.
You think the Terry Pagula pep talk is going to take them back to the promised land?
I will be honest, I probably won't watch a single second of that game tonight. There are way more interesting hockey games on tonight, and Buffalo versus Montreal will not have my attention. I'm just going to be fully transparent about that one.
Do you think Laine will keep scoring?
Probably. He's been money for them. But so the matchups tonight are weird. Like, there isn't one game. Like, it's Buffalo, Montreal, LA, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Tampa, Islanders, Hurricanes, Rangers, Nashville, Devils, St. Louis, Washington, Chicago, Boston, Calgary, Ottawa, Seattle, Winnipeg, San Jose. There's not like one really good matchup tonight. Like, I don't even think, I don't know what the most interesting game would be.
You don't think it's the Rangers versus Nashville? I mean, let me ask you this.
Interesting in the worst way.
If the Rangers lose this game tonight, is it? Like, is Lavi gone? Is Drury gone?
We've been saying that for days already.
Is Panarin playing tonight?
I think Drury's the first domino to drop. I think.
Drury you think he goes before Lavi goes?
Before Lavi let, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
I do.
Interesting.
Yeah, that game's interesting for all the worst reasons. I'm probably going to watch Macklin versus Winnipeg. Excited to watch that one. Did you see the Golden State Warriors put up Macklin on the Jumbotron and just totally didn't acknowledge Will Smith?
I mean, that's kind of like, how do you not throw Will Smith up there as well? I mean, obviously, look, everybody knows the relationship from Macklin to the Golden State Warriors. His dad worked there. Like, Macklin's like BFF is Draymond Green. I think he still plays for them, right? He's
Yeah.
not just a
Yeah.
podcaster now, is he? All right, yeah. I'm not a basketball guy, especially with what's happening in Philadelphia with the 76ers. But you know, I'll probably watch that game too. I mean, I love when you get an opportunity. Is that
San Jose?
West?
It's a late night
in
game.
San Jose,
Yeah.
so it's a late game. So I won't. That'll be a tough one for me to make. But look forward to continuing to see Celebrini do Celebrini types of things. Man, that guy is really impressive. So we'll see what happens. Maybe we're going to be getting on here tomorrow talking about a new GM in New York. Who knows, right? And if that's the case, like I wonder who takes over. Makes you wonder, should they have fired Jeff Gorton? Should they have fired Davidson? Should they have done that? Was that a little bit too premature there by Dolan? I don't know. We'll find out. That's all the time we have today, Johnny. I know you probably want to go into a Rangers thing right now, but we're not going to do that.
I actually don't at all.
I'm going to be on baby duty here shortly as Alex is taking Sloan to her music class shortly. So I'm going to have to go. I will be on Daily Faceoff Live today with Carter Hutton. No Frank, no Tyler. So a little bit of a different flavor between the two of us with Carter Hutton and I. And then we'll see what happens. And then you got the sheet at 3 p.m. Did you talk to Jeff today? Do you know who his guest is on the sheet today?
He just texted the both of us. I'm not sure who his guest is today, but it was fun going on his show yesterday.
Everybody else must have been busy, huh?
Yeah, he was strapped yesterday.
I would think that people must have been busy if you made it all the way
Greg
down.
Wyshynski is going on today.
Okay, Greg Wyshynski today. Oh yeah, that's every Tuesday on the sheet. They're sort of re-teaming up from their past. So again, you know the lineup. I actually saw a new podcast coming out on the Daily Faceoff as well. I saw that promoted on Jeff's show yesterday. I got to get more details on that though. You know, it's one of those great Canadian historian writers. Of course, I'm drawing a blank on the name right now. So
up front with Stephen Brunt.
There you go. Up front with Stephen Brunt. Again, somebody that Tommy T says that I'm low key jealous that Johnny was on the sheet yesterday. You're right. I'm jealous of Johnny. Anyways, great show today. The chat was good. Hey, listen, I know I didn't say it yet.
Man. You were on fire today.
Give us a like on this episode. Give us a subscribe on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We're not that far away from trade deadline. Like, we're really not. I mean, we're 2 weeks away from January, which means we're not that far from February, which means we're not that far from the playoffs. You know, I mean,
it's summer.
Honestly, the Stanley Cup's right around the corner. So get involved with our YouTube, subscribe, like, all of the above. Give us a download. Get the automatic download on. I say that all the time. Just so it automatically. So it's just there. That way, when you get to your phone, you get in the car, it's right there. You're ready to go. So having said that, Johnny, any final words not related to the New York Rangers?
No, I'm going to credit my producer, my co-host for a great show today. Vic, you crushed it. Colby, you're on fire. Well done.
I did have a lot to say this morning. I wonder if there'll be a rebuttal. I welcome it.
I'm sure
I welcome it.
Yeah.
I welcome it. I'm sure some of your stat friends will be hiding behind their keyboard, you know, talking shit today.
And
so
if they want to talk shit, they can come on our show and talk shit.
Absolutely. I welcome it face to face. Usually I wouldn't let any of those nerds on our show, but if they want to come on our show to argue with me, have at it. I'm all for it. So we'll see everybody tomorrow right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube at 9 a.m. Thanks for rolling with us.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.